We are about at that time. So I'm just going to kick it off. We've got 37 participants so far, so excellent. And I'm sure we'll get a few more coming in here. This is Sarah Grimm from the Wisconsin Historical Society, and I want to welcome you back to our Hot Topic webinar series as part of our ongoing CoSA and Preservica Practical Digital Preservation webinar series that started last fall. As you can see from this list, we've come a long ways. After today, we're going to have one more Hot Topic webinar in June called Real World Digital Preservation and Program Roundup, where we're going to have a selection of state archives who will share their experiences of justifying, implementing, and managing their digital preservation program, as well as a roundup of all the resources that have been shared during our training program thus far. So that ought to be an excellent program. Stay tuned, and we'll be sending out notices on that shortly. And then we also have the last of our two-part workshops coming up very shortly here on May 10th and May 17th. So please feel free to advertise those to anyone who you feel would benefit from that program. Those are free to everyone. The Hot Topics are free to CoSA members. For today's program on new ways of providing access to your archive, we are actually going to have a variety of speakers today. Michael Hope from Preservica is going to kick us off and continue to guide us through our series as he has done thus far. And Michael has worked in IT and information management for over 25 years, with his recent focus as marketing director for Preservica has been to raise the awareness of the importance of digital preservation, including devising and running education programs such as this one. Our second speaker, Elizabeth Perks, who is the electronic records archivist from the Utah State Archives, is going to be discussing how Utah uniquely provides access to their collections. And our third speaker, Veronica Martzel from Massachusetts Archives, where she is the digital records archivist. She is responsible for the implementation of new archival collections management system and digital preservation repository, as well as the arrangement and description of all digital content held by the archives. So we've got a great program coming up for you. If while we're going through any of these presentations and you have questions, please, please, please feel free to enter them in the chat box along the right-hand side, and we will get to them. If not immediately, certainly by the end of the program. And also at the end, there will be a survey when you close your browser, and with every completed survey, you will win a copy of today's presentation. So with that, Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, we've definitely come a long way. And let's go back. We've definitely come a long way. So I'm just going to say a little bit of an introduction and welcome to today's webinar. But luckily for you, most of the presentation and most of the talking will be done by Elizabeth and Veronica, who have very kindly agreed to share what they're doing in terms of public access for their records. So I'm just going to do a little bit of introduction. What is access, and what does it mean to different organizations? So it can be used in a couple of senses. So obviously in the digital preservation world, it can mean accessibility, ensuring that content is accessible and readable into the future. But in the context we're looking at today, it's also an opportunity for organizations like yourselves to showcase your archive or collection to fulfill a legal mandate, which is typical here, particularly amongst the state archives, for greater transparency of government records, is a driving need. Enhancing, obviously providing access to your archive can enhance the reputation and also the brand of your organization. And one of the other key things is by opening up your archive, you can also help to build a more sustainable future, either through actually pay-per-view or a subscription, or we find a lot of customers find it easier to to go back to their stakeholders and say, this is going really well. Have a look at all the fantastic stuff we have, and it helps to build a sustainable future. And in most cases, it's all of the above. So it's the preservation aspect as well as meeting some legal mandate as well as showcasing the archive. So the other thing to note is that Access is we couldn't escape without showing an OAIS diagram. So I've got that up, but it's clear that Access is along with preservation planning and ingest and storage, etc., is a key function of the OAIS reference model, and so in that sense, preservation and access go together. And as we all know, it's not necessarily the same content that your consumers or your designated community might want to access as you might ingest into the archive or indeed store in the archive. So a classic example is having preservation copies, maybe a large TIFF master file which you keep within the archive, and then for access reasons you share out a presentation, a JPEG version, or you might keep, for example, an editable Word version still inside the archive, and for dissemination and access you have PDF versions. So preservation and access kind of go hand in hand. So without further ado, that's just my short introduction. I'll come back at the end and talk about some of the considerations, maybe share a few other examples of people are doing access, and also give you some next steps and resources. So I'll hand over now to Elizabeth, who'll take you through what she's doing at Utah, and then she'll hand over to Veronica in due course.
Thank you. So in Utah, we have a system called AXAEM that manages all of our workflow. This is where we start with our record descriptions, and it's the master copy of the record descriptions, but it gets pushed out to a whole bunch of external places where it's advantageous. So we can create our finding aids through this system with just a click of the button. We can push out the same data as MARC catalog data, and then we can upload that to any MARC compatible system. We reuse the metadata here in our content DM for online digital collections. We also have metadata for our electronic records in AXAEM, and we use AXAEM as our preservation system. So just to go into a little bit more detail, our finding aids, we can export them as static HTML or XML, or we can also on our website have a link which connects directly to the database and makes it a dynamic, exactly as it is at that particular moment, finding aid. It can keep track of versions of finding aids, so if you are working on a new version but you don't want to publish it yet, you can use AXAEM to keep track of that and then deliberately publish a finding aid when the new version is ready to go. We have our finding aids linked to a search engine called Solar. So if you're doing a search in Solar for records, you can pull up a hit and it can show the finding aid in context. Our finding aids also, because it has the database back end, it's able to connect to all of the other information in our system, and we have a feature there where it keeps track of related records. So if one record series is related to another record series, we note that in the database, and then when the finding aids are produced, it automatically creates a link to that other record series, so you can go back and forth and see the different series that are tied together by subject, content, or what have you. So one of our outputs is our catalog. For several years, we've been using a product called Symphony, where it's just a MARC catalog interface. We've also uploaded our AXAEM data into WorldCat. So this is, again, an easy way for users to get the data out of AXAEM. It's just a click of the button to run the export, and then you take that data and import it into whatever cataloging system you happen to be using. And because AXAEM's fields are reusable for multiple output, the users don't generally realize that they're even cataloging when they do their data entry, except for maybe the subject headings. That gets a little bit more technical into the mark-coded fields, but the rest of it is just all mapped so it can go in a whole bunch of different directions all at once. Now we're changing our public-facing catalog to use the Solar search engine instead of the Symphony product, which is kind of going away. The state is not going to be using that anymore. Solar is a very robust search engine, and it is directly connected into AXAEM. It has keyword searching, faceting. It even offers geospatial interfaces, so you could do a map search. So it has a lot of features that we haven't quite explored yet. We're just in the process of designing how we want it to look and to work, and so those discussions are happening, and then when we're ready to go, we will make it available to the public. Any change that is made in AXAEM will automatically update in Solar. There's one place where we are using Solar live for the public to access, and that is with our Open Records portal, which is a website that allows the public to ask for records from any governmental entity. And we've started playing with Solar there so that people can do browsing and keyword searching and all different kinds of things. Next, we have our digital collections. Some of our digital collections, or most of them actually, are in Content DM. And then we also have our name indexes, which are contained in our AXAEM system. And those two systems work together to some extent. The metadata from AXAEM is exported, such as series and container information is reused in Content DM. And then our name indexes, especially our birth and death records, are contained in AXAEM and very, very popular. It's probably the most popular thing on our website, has been since we uploaded them in 2006. Just thousands and thousands and thousands of hits. The public uses that one feature more than anything else in our web presence. So those name indexes are available through Solar. If somebody is wanting to search for a name index item and the images happen to be in Content DM, the web interface will automatically take the user to the Content DM after they do their search in the AXAEM web interface. So they're a little bit connected. Then we have our electronic records. We ingest our electronic records into AXAEM's preservation system. It will automatically create an access copy based on the preservation rules that you set, and you can choose which tool creates that copy. So we have rules set up for different format types. If you ingest a TIFF and you want the access copy to be a JPEG, you can set it up so that ImageMagick or some other related tool can automatically create that as the access copy, and then it will place that on the web server so that when somebody is looking through our Solar search engine, they can see the metadata that is contained for the electronic record, and they can go ahead and just download that access copy. Another thing that's related to our electronic records is as we develop our Open Records portal, which has many features at the moment, but still will be developed to quite an extent with electronic records, it'll provide a spot for us to encourage agencies to transfer their records to us, and eventually provide a mechanism where people can search through electronic records through the Solar search engine that's connected to the Open Records portal. So AXAEM itself is technology that is open source and yet vendor supported. It's written with a rapid application development tool. That piece is a commercial product, but the business logic that we have added to it, that part is open source. So AXAEM supports multiple types of databases and instances, so you can, if you want to, use Epic's native database plus Oracle like we do in conjunction together, or MySQL, or if you're into Windows, SQL Server. So any of them, you can have multiple databases connected to it at the same time. You can also have a distributed framework where the application can be located in different spots, and each instance of the application can talk to each other, so it can be distributed for large collections. You can either install it on-site through your local servers, or it could be cloud-hosted. It has been used as a backend to Drupal for some institutions that use that. And it connects to a whole bunch of external tools. So we run a bunch of tools in the back end, and AXAEM treats it as if it's just one complete workflow. And as we come across useful tools, we can add more of them without too much complication. So that's pretty much what AXAEM's about. I'll turn it over to Veronica now.
Okay, thank you so much, Elizabeth. It's always wonderful hearing about what you guys are doing in Utah, and I'm always amazed at how integrated your system is out there. Thank you, everybody, for having me today. As Elizabeth said, my name is Veronica Martzel, and I'm with the Massachusetts Archive. Support. So I thought a good place to start my portion of the presentation would be to review a little bit about how we provided access to records when I started at the Mass Archive around August of 2013. Our primary access to information about our collections was through MARC records, and that was a process that the archive started, creation of MARC records going back to the early 1990s. There. So our records were and continue to be available through WorldCat and also through ArchiveGrid. Additionally, all accession information and box level descriptions, and when I say box level descriptions, I really mean more higher level aggregates of boxes, entire accretions that would come in. One description may encompass 2 boxes, it may encompass 50 boxes. But each of those types of information were managed in separate access databases that had no online component available to them. Additionally, the output from the box description, which we called our shelf list, or still call our shelf list, the output from that access database was printed out and housed in a series of 20-plus binders at our records desk. So in a lot of ways, this is really, how people were able to get a deeper dive into our collection materials, was really coming to the desk, looking through binders and working with the staff to locate what they were looking for. When it came to trying to find out what we had more broadly and maybe not having to come in and stand at the desk every time, there is additionally some high-level textual synopsis of our holdings on the archive's website. And when I say high-level, it is very high-level. Doesn't dive in particularly deeply into our holdings. Additionally, we do have a few online indices. But again, these are, really quite old at this point, particularly the index to vital records is all 3 of these indices listed there, the Mass Archives Collection Database, the Passenger Manifest, and the Vital Records are all access databases that are really starting to limp along and don't have necessarily the longevity we'd like to see. And particularly the Vitals is starting to suffer from age. But for all of these modes of access I've described, you're really providing access to the cataloging or indexing without any sort of direct object access. When it came to providing some sort of access to digital objects, we do have our agreement and partnership with Family Search, which at least as a way to back up that failing vitals index that we have. So being able to provide access to birth, death, and marriage records from 1841 to 1920. And we'll be moving forward before too long with the next sort of 5-year increment of that, bringing our collection up to 1925. So that's sort of an overview of where we were a little over 2 years ago. And it really highlighted some of the basic needs that I saw when I came into my position, that we really needed to find a way to provide access to our record group and series information in a way that was more user-friendly and integrated. You know, not everybody's real comfortable with Archives Grid or being able to go through or even have access to WorldCat or know to go to look there for things. And I've definitely found with Archives Grid that, you know, you get little snippets of information, but the relationship between your records groups and your series is really hard to establish in that way. And it is just providing information at that very high level. There's not a place really to put information about box lists or folder lists that we may have available in hard copy at the reference desk, but there was no way of integrating that into our description and access information that was getting out. Additionally, we really were in a position where we were going to need to start providing access to born digital records. We were coming up on a gubernatorial transition where it was very clear as an imperative for our office to be able to, you know, ingest in those born digital records that the outgoing administration had created and be able to provide access to those records moving forward. So we approached providing access in a couple of different ways. One was through the utilization of a new archival collection management system that we're looking to use as sort of our basis for finding aids. That is still very much in progress. Unfortunately, it has not gone anywhere near as smoothly as I had anticipated it going. So we're still struggling on how exactly to took a while to get our legacy data into the new system, and then how do we get it out in a way that's really user-friendly, provides the right information, the right level of contextual access to our collection materials. Additionally, we are very fortunate in Massachusetts that we have a regional collaborative available known as Digital Commonwealth that is a group that provides access to selected digitized materials. It's an organization that was originally created through a grant-funded project. Their funding has since been taken up by the Massachusetts legislature. They're sort of based out of the Boston Public Library, and they do a lot of great work of working with small historical societies and you know, public history rooms in local libraries to identify, you know, sort of easily digitized material, a lot of images, a lot of yearbooks, and getting those available online in sort of a single location. So we've been able to partner with them to digitize a series of paintings of birds of Massachusetts and New England, and we look forward to, in the next year or so, doing a large-scale digitization of 3 early map collections that we have from, I believe, 1875 and 1795 and 1803. So that's one partnership that we've been able to utilize. But all of these did not meet our needs for providing access to, let alone providing a trustworthy repository environment for any born digital records. And here you go with your second chance to look at the OAIS model. I kind of like Michael's a little bit better. It's a little more understated than all these colors here. So when we started looking for our trusted digital repository, we felt like there were sort of limited options out there. I had come from an environment where we had worked with a Fedora repository, and they were in the process of building various Hydra heads. And it became very clear and very obvious very quickly that that was just not a sustainable idea within our environment here. we didn't have the technical support to be able to, get it up and running, and we certainly didn't have the ability in-house to be able to maintain it and sustain it going forward. DSpace didn't seem like a particularly good fit either. Again, open source tool, this wasn't going to meet in some ways the robust nature of what we figured we were going to be taking in and the wide variety of materials we'd be taking in. At that time, Archives Direct was just starting out. There was sort of indications that it might be happening, and they were sort of laying out what it would look like, but there wasn't really any front-end component to it, and that was really a thing that we were very concerned about, particularly with the gubernatorial records. There was indications that we're going to need to be able to provide public access to that and direct access to our digital objects. I didn't include it on the slide, but I'll just mention AXAEM as well. As you saw from Elizabeth's presentation, it can do so much. It was just a little bit overwhelming for where we were in getting started with the process. And I think it's been my sense, too, that sort of the vendor support has increased a great deal over the last few years. So it wasn't a good fit for the amount of support we were going to need and the technical infrastructure that we were looking at. So when it came down to it, really Preservica seemed like the best choice for us, both for the preservation and also for the access component of it. Within Preservica, we have the universal access interface, which is built on WordPress, and I'm sure Michael will be speaking a little bit more to that momentarily. But one thing that was nice is I was able to customize the look and feel to sort of match the Secretary's website without a whole lot of technical expertise needed with that. Additionally, I've been able to work with the Preservica support staff to get a little bit of customized metadata in place that helps us, to highlight the record group and series information that we were looking to have. So you can see down in the box, we have information about, what record group, series, file unit, and item cataloging we have for this particular digital object. It really was important that we be able to tie together our cataloging and our access to the digital objects as directly and seamlessly as we could. But that was definitely not something that I could take on by myself and needed tech support to help with. Sort of looking ahead, since we were so new at working with born digital and even digitized materials, I think one area we're really going to focus on is enhancements to metadata, really determining what we have and what we want to be capturing, what we can translate to provide more access points through our metadata that we have. Additionally, I'll just point back here, you can notice here on the screen the title's got the .jpeg on there. I'm working with tech support to figure out how to make sure that that comes through as, just the title. We're also looking at different tiers of access. That's something that I really hadn't anticipated as something we were going to need, but it's come up in a couple different occasions now where in one case we had digitized a significant amount of boards and commissions records, particularly records about the appointments of sheriffs and sheriff's deputies, and the creating agency needs to have access to those digitized materials, but those are actually restricted from public viewing because they contain, the personal private addresses of the sheriffs and deputy sheriffs, and that is restricted by statute. So being able to, provide access to the creating agency, but not to the general public. Additionally, we have another set of photographs from early half of the 20th century where we've received information from the creating agency that there's actually some security issues around providing open access to all of the images due to, they're built photos of building roads and waterways and things like that. So there's some homeland security concerns about them. So we want to be able to, provide access to part of the records, but not to necessarily all of those. And then additionally, hoping to utilize some of the code customization that's coming out of Texas, which I know you'll be seeing an example of soon. It's been really amazing to see what they've been able to do there with their universal access implementation. So that's a little bit about where we've been, where we're going, and where we hope to continue moving forward. And I will go ahead and turn it back over to Michael.
Well, thank you very much, Veronica, and thank you very much also, Elizabeth, for sharing a little bit of the background of your journey with providing access and some of the tools that you're using to do that. I'm just going to share a couple more examples, maybe some considerations if you haven't started on the access journey as yet. This is just a little bit of background on how Preservica works. And if you're looking at other systems, and maybe this is a key thing you want to look for. So preservation and access in one, but the key thing is we expose a CMIS interface, which is an industry standard content management interoperability services, which is a way for exchanging content and metadata between systems, and that then allows a great deal of flexibility in how you build the access portal into there. So there's various ways. There's taking the sort of the vanilla out of the box and customizing that using the sort of tools that are supplied within that sort of WordPress environment. Or you can go a stage further, and if you've got some access to some web people, you can create style sheets. And I'll show you some examples of that as well. You can sort of brand it up quite significantly. Obviously, if you have got access to web development skills in Drupal, you can create a Drupal website. We even have users who are doing custom builds and just calling the content or the presentation versions of the content using the CMIS interface. So here's I can't seem to move the slides. Oh, there we go. So there is, this is just an example of a sort of out-of-the-box look and feel, but that can be quite quickly customized in terms of changing the colors and logos and some of the items on the front page to meet your organization. And search is very important, as has been highlighted several times, that people can search and browse your archive to find information. Here's another example, which is the UK UK Met Office, and they share a lot of information on records of the weather in the UK going back hundreds of years. So it's quite extensively used, particularly for climate change research, etc. And I've also put the link in there, so you can go and look and browse through their site. And this is actually done with a style sheet, which is applied to the WordPress environment. It can very quickly produce a very different, highly branded look and feel. But again, pulling presentation copies from the preservation system. So Veronica mentioned Texas, and I think that Mark and the team down there, I think Mark's on the call this evening, have done a fabulous job in terms of taking the basic access system and customizing and branding that up with a really fabulous portal, the Texas Digital Archive, and which is you're pulling out information from the core archive. So that's just a few examples of how quickly and how easily it can be, and how flexible it can be to create access into your archive. Here's a few considerations. Obviously, having, as we've seen, OAS has preservation and access together. So having a system which can do preservation, and Access is going to potentially save you time, money, and effort, and not having duplicated copies. Make sure any system you're considering is pretty simple and, more importantly, is secure, so you know that what you're providing access to is actually public, and anything that you don't want to supply access to is not given. Is not given access, and it's very easy to set that up. And some of the things you might want to consider in the future, as Veronica was alluding to, would be to have authenticated access. You can have different groups of users having a password to access the site, as opposed to the public, which can just go in and browse and search and find stuff. So as I said, make sure it's easy to customize, and there's open interfaces like the CMIS interface. Search is crucial, as we've highlighted. So it's make sure you've got good search facilities. It's easy to browse. It gets easily found by Google and other search engines. And it's got facilities like faceted search as well, which can help optimize the searching of the archive by the public. Server-side rendering, that means that any content you have is actually rendered on the server rather than being downloaded to the device. That can help in several ways. One is less traffic over the network, but more importantly, you can support multiple devices. People are using phones, smartphones, iPads, and PCs to browse your archive these days. So that makes sure that it's shown in the optimum way without having to have the native application installed on that particular device. Easy to share. So I think you saw on some of the examples that you share on Twitter, share on Facebook, so you can promote your content across the internet. And finally, in the back end, it's always good to have sort of embedded tools like Google Analytics or Add This or other tools, so that you can know what your most popular pages are, as well as be able to communicate back to your stakeholders. How many hits you've had, which content is the most popular. One final consideration, which isn't on here, is the ability to do virtual collections. So, for example, if you find that certain content is the most popular, you can rearrange your archive without rearranging the physical archive. Just build a virtual collection, which allows you then to have temporary online exhibitions, or combine information so you can search. The public can search your archive in a slightly different way to maybe the way it's organized at the bottom level by having a virtual collection. So that's all I was going to say, just a few additional examples and some considerations. Just to wrap up, there's plenty of information and next steps you can take. So there is, of course, the PERTS portal, which has information on there about access, but also there's, if you haven't seen Preservica and you want to see it, then there's a live demo running tomorrow. As Sarah was saying, the next workshops are 10th and 17th of May, Module 1 and Module 2, and it's, as she was saying, it's amazing that we are now coming to the last of these sessions, having started these back in the fall of last year. You can learn more about Preservica Universal Access on that link there, and there's a couple of white papers you can also download to give you background to digital preservation and safeguarding electronic records. So without further ado, again, a big thanks to Elizabeth and to Veronica. I'd like to open it up to questions.
Hi, it's Veronica. So I noticed there was a question in the box, and I'm having a little trouble typing in the answer. So I'll just go ahead and read it out. It's just a question about an example of one of the Texas customizations that you'd like to utilize. I really like how they've taken sort of the default where it presents 6 boxes across the browse screen, and they've transformed that into sort of a larger 4-box format. And then, you know, in their case, they've definitely put the border around it and such. I just like that delineation quite a bit. And I think it draws a little bit more attention to each of the individual series and collections. So moving from sort of the 6-box format to 4 is something that I'm hoping to try my hand at and hopefully not break too much while doing it.
So anybody else, please feel free to type in the Q&A box or the chat box. While we're waiting, Elizabeth, if I could ask you, can you describe, oh, nice. Mark Myers from Texas says, Brian says he'd share the code. There's such givers down there. Thanks, guys. Elizabeth, can you describe the team that you have working behind the scenes? You mentioned a lot of technology and that type of thing. How big is your IT staff?
Well, me and the vendor, I suppose.
Excellent.
So there are probably, the vendor has maybe 3 programmers that work on our system at any given time, depending on the nature of the project.
Okay. So a lot of it's not coming from in-house, which I think is a huge thing for many of the state archives. We don't have a lot of in-house IT staff, a lot of us.
Well, our IT in Utah is distributed, so the server is maintained by our Department of Technology Services, but they don't really touch our AXAEM system at all. They just manage the hardware. But the application logic, we decide locally what features we want, and then if I can do it, I do it. And then if not, then we send it out to the vendor to do.
Oh, excellent. Mark Myers says for a price. Okay, we'll be talking to you later, Mark.
Brian sent me the code already. I just haven't had time to do it yet, so you're out of luck, Mark.
All right. Who else has got any questions? No more questions. All right. Well, we are going to have the survey at the end, so please take the time to fill that out if you have the time. We would appreciate it. And you will get a free copy of the presentation so you can see what everybody's doing on various necks of the woods out here. And please feel free to join us for our next webinars in June and the big ones in May if you have not. And advertise. Feel free to advertise. Get the information out. And we look forward to seeing you then.